Hello and welcome to today's Wild Lunch Wednesdays event. My name is Charlotte and I will be your host today as we meet one of ZSL's research scientists, David Curnick, and find out more about his fieldwork experiences out in the Indian Ocean studying sharks. Now, Wild Lunch Wednesdays are all about you finding out more about our staff and students who work at the Zoological Society of London, but also they're about giving you the opportunity to ask them your questions. So I'm going to share my screen with you now to show you how to do this. All you need to do is go to pigeonhole.at/2026, and there you will be able to submit your questions throughout today's event for David. So that's www.pigeonhole.at/2026. There's also the opportunity there to upvote other people's questions. So even if you don't have a question that you would like to put to David, if there are other questions there that you would really like to hear the answer to, then do mark them, like them, so that I can see which are the most popular questions, because those are the ones that we're going to try and focus on during the event. So as I mentioned, we're joined by David today, who works within the Institute of Zoology at ZSL, and he gets to go out to the Indian Ocean on field work. Now, David, hopefully you're able to turn your video on. There we go. It's not just me. I'm not going to have to answer loads of questions about sharks. And thank you so much for joining us today, David. Before we go any further, I've asked quite a lot of the speakers so far in this series if they can describe their fieldwork experiences using just 3 words. So if I was to pose the same question to you, what would you say?
Yeah, so well, first of all, it's a lot of fun. I love my job, and one of the main reasons I do it is because of how much I enjoy it. The second word is challenging, because while it's fun, it can be hard work at times, logistically, if nothing else. And third, collaborative. We get to work with people from all over the world, meet a lot of different people. So yeah, those are the 3 words I'd say.
Brilliant. Fun, challenging, and collaborative. So it's not just ZSL scientists that you're working with, it's people from all over the place.
No, yeah, exactly. All over the world, all bringing different ideas, not only different institutions, different countries, but also different fields and backgrounds. And that really helps drive science forward. So that's a real, bonus of the job.
Brilliant. Well, we've got some great photos to share with everyone today of your time out in the field in the Indian Ocean. You focus particularly on large fish, tuna and also sharks. Why sharks? What is it about sharks that interests you?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, a lot of my research focuses on marine predators, sharks, tunas, but also some of the large groupers, etc., on reefs. And why I'm interested in them is they are these important apex predators in our ocean. They play a crucial function in maintaining the health, structure, and function of the food chain below them, as they sit at the top, or just near the top for some of them. But also, the reality is that they are important economically and commercially for either fisheries or ecotourism, and therefore they're important species for local communities that depend on them as well. So it's an important group of animals that we need to better manage, and to manage them we need to better understand their biology and their ecology, and that's where my research feeds in.
And in particular, you go on fieldwork to the Indian Ocean. Why this particular part of the world?
Yeah, so for about the last 10 years, a lot of my work has focused on the Chagos Archipelago in the Central Indian Ocean, funded by the Bertarelli Foundation. And the Chagos Archipelago is incredibly remote, as you can see from this image. If you said put a pin in the middle of the Indian Ocean, that's exactly where it is. And its remoteness has really sheltered it from a lot of the pressures that impact sites elsewhere in the Indian Ocean, whether that's local pollution, whether that's sedimentation, coastal development. So the Chagos Archipelago is this ocean observatory where we can observe animals in as near as pristine condition as is probably possible in the world right now. Nowhere is devoid of pressure, and unfortunately, the archipelago is still influenced by climate change. Corals still bleach, pollution still drifts in. There is illegal fishing, but it's been previously estimated that the archipelago has 6 times the reef fish biomass of elsewhere in the Indian Ocean. There's an abundance of shark species there, and as this picture is a group of juvenile, about a year-old grey reef sharks that mobbed our boat once. So it's an amazing reference site for the rest of the world to understand what impact we're having on our oceans, and how that's impacting the behaviour and the function of the ecosystem.
Well, we've got questions which are coming through already from viewers, so thank you ever so much for those. And one of them sort of links quite nicely to what you've just been saying, David, because people are really keen to know what is the biggest risk for sharks and other marine life at the moment, and maybe particularly focusing on the area where you work in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, so sharks in particular, it's estimated that over a quarter of them, or about a quarter, are threatened with extinction at the moment, and the primary driver of that is fishing pressure. They are a heavily fished species. There's tens, if not hundreds of millions of sharks taken out of the ocean each year, and that's the primary threat. There's also additional threats on top of that, local threats like pollution. This is a picture of some of the an illegal catch that was in the Chagos archipelago. So not only overfishing, but illegal fishing. And because sharks are relatively slow growing and slow to reproduce, they're not a good candidate species many of them are not a good candidate species for fishing because they just do not reproduce fast enough. And that has all those consequences for the rest of the food chain and the rest of the ecosystem. If we lose our top predators, we can have these cascading effects down.
Okay, well, we've got a few other questions which are coming through. Some in particular focusing on certain species of shark, David. So
Sure.
This is going to test your knowledge, because we've got one here from Bobby, who's aged 8 and watching us. So thank you for sending in your question, Bobby. And the question is, how long do great white sharks live for? Do you know that one, David?
I think I know. So great white sharks, I think there was a recent study that showed that they could live potentially 60, 70 years old, maybe a bit longer. Mm-hmm. Again, because of fishing pressure in the wild, it's unusual for an animal to live that long. So I suspect most of the sharks will be a bit younger than that. But I think I'm pretty confident saying that's where your top limit is. So let's say about 70 years old.
That sounds pretty good. That's longer than I was expecting. And one more question from viewers before we move on. How did you get into your career, David? There are probably some would-be marine biologists out there watching today. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family where my father was a fisheries manager, an angling recreational fisheries manager in the Thames estuary, Kent area. So I used to spend my Saturdays working on the lakes and the rivers down there. I went to university, I did marine and freshwater biology, and then was lucky enough to get a job at ZSL, where my first job at ZSL was associated primarily around the Thames and the Thames estuary. And if you live in and around London, there are sharks and rays a lot of sharks and rays that live in the Thames estuary. So we had projects there, and I was working on those for a few years, and then decided that I wanted to do my PhD, and I decided to specialize in marine predator ecology. So did my PhD, and now I'm here. So that's how it happened.
Is there any advice you'd give anyone who's interested in a career in marine biology?
Get your hands dirty. I mean, get out in the field, whether it's volunteering with ZSL or with the Shark Trust on their great egg case hunt. You can go around the coast, look for the egg cases, mermaids' purses on the shore, and identify those and find out what species of skates, rays, and sharks are living around our coast. So just get your hands dirty, get involved, would be my first recommendation. And then, go to university if you can and study marine biology, zoology, or a biological degree. and then follow on from there.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, David. Do keep sending in your questions for David. I'll quickly share that link with you once more. There we go. So it's www.pigeonhole.at/2026. We'll see how many more we can cram in before 1 o'clock. David, you mentioned some of the sharks that are found in the Indian Ocean. We had a question there about great white sharks. What species are you working with when you're out in the field?
Yeah, so the Chagos Archipelago, we don't really see great white sharks. There's been reports of one that did come up from South Africa, but we don't see them there. But aside from not having great white sharks in abundance, we have lots of reef shark species, lots of manta rays, silky sharks, and a lot of these animals are in numbers that are quite hard to find elsewhere in the Indian Ocean because of the fishing pressure we've discussed previously. Mm-hmm. Whale sharks are one that we also have. This was a whale shark we encountered last year. I was out in the archipelago whilst the COVID pandemic struck and lockdown started, which made for an interesting return home. But we encountered this juvenile male. This animal is about 4.5 meters, and this was the first whale shark I've ever swum with, and it was massive. And my colleagues who've swum with many whale sharks were like, this is a tiny one. I was like, wow, how big do these get? And they can get, over 10 meters long. Like, this is half the size of what it could be, and it was massive. But so we have a lot of different species that we know are out there, but the reality is that our research to date has been really biased towards the reefs and the shallow water environments. We really don't know the shark diversity at depth. We don't really know what's going on down in the deep ocean or on seamounts, and there's over 70 seamounts in the archipelago. We've only really looked into one briefly. So we're only really scratching the surface of the diversity, but there's a lot of species of sharks there for sure, and in good numbers.
Well, that's really good to know. But you mentioned how, although there's lots of them there's still so many questions we have about them. They really haven't been researched in the same detail, perhaps, as other species. So how do you study these animals, which sometimes swim very, very deep in the oceans, can travel incredible distances? What techniques do you use?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different techniques that we use. We do look at genetics. We take some tissue samples to look at what they're feeding from the chemical signatures in their tissue. But we're really restricted, given the remote location, about how much time we can spend in the field. So we have to employ techniques that collect data for us when we're not there. So one example is satellite tags. And satellite tags we attach to animals and program them to collect location, depth, and temperature data on animals for 6, 9, 12 months. And so they'll record their location every day and how they're behaving in the water column. And at the end of that period that we've pre-programmed, the tag will automatically detach from the animal. It will float to the surface, and then it will transmit the data back to us via satellite. And then it's our job to analyze those data and recreate the behavior of that animal, where it's been, but also how it's been using its environment, how it's been diving, which can be an indicator of feeding behavior. And this is a great way of collecting valuable data without us needing to be in the field all the time, which is not only expensive, but I don't think my wife or family would be particularly thrilled if I was somewhere else for 12 months. So it's a very effective way of collecting data. But the caveat to that is these tags are expensive. Each one of those tags is about $4,000. And it's even more expensive when they don't pop off the shark for whatever reason. Or if they do pop off, they sink. So that's one of the frustrations. But it's a very, very cool piece of tech, and we get some real valuable data back from them.
Sounds absolutely incredible. I'm going to ask you more about that, David, in a minute. But before I do, we've got some more questions that have come through from viewers. One which is particularly popular is, how can we help our marine predators? What would you suggest people can do?
Good question. So I think one of the best measures and steps you can take is thinking about the fish you're eating and making sustainable choices at the supermarket or the fishmongers, wherever you get your fish from. As we previously mentioned, sharks are threatened from fishing, and that's not necessarily always by targeted fishing, also as bycatch. So you can select certain fish that are caught in ways that don't negatively impact sharks. I would also recommend sharks, but for all fisheries, buy local wherever possible. Buy from your local fishmongers, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Where did this come from? How was it caught? And we can provide some links afterwards on the best fishing practices to look for. Normally it's pole and line because it's targeting one specific species and one individual. Some fishing strategies out there will deploy thousands of fishing hooks into the ocean, which is completely indiscriminate, and they will catch everything from what they're trying to catch through to sharks, through to other species as well. So it's about being clever with your choices, and that's the one leading kind of change you can make in order to help out marine predators. Sounds
like good advice. We've got a few questions, David, about specific sharks, which might start to test your knowledge, and some about UK species as well. I don't know how hot you are on UK stuff, but
it's been a few years, but I'll give it a go.
Let's see. Can you tell us a bit about sharks around the UK? Do we have many species?
Yes, we have lots of species. I don't know the number. I'd have to look that up. We have lots of species of sharks and a lot of species of rays as well. And we have sharks ranging from small cat sharks, or one of those dogfish or smooth hounds, all the way up to very close relatives of great white sharks. We have poor beagle sharks around the UK. But really, really cool are the basking sharks. The second largest shark species are present in the UK in good numbers, particularly off the coast of Scotland. So we have a lot of species, and ZSL also runs a project on angel sharks off the coast of Wales, a critically endangered species. So lots and lots. And as I mentioned previously, the Thames estuary has a number of shark species, whether that's spur dog, whether that's taupe, which have a really cool translucent snout, or thornback rays. So loads, lots and lots.
And there's another question about the mermaids' purses that you mentioned previously. Yes. What should people do if they find one? Is there anywhere they should report it to, or is it just an exciting find?
Well, first of all, it's exciting. Take a picture, and you can go to the Shark Trust website and look up the Great Egg Case Hunt. Particularly now it's around Easter. What perfect time to go looking for eggs. And if you can upload it either to I think their website or maybe on their Twitter account, they'll be able to ID it for you and tell you what species it is. And then you'll know that animal is present in and around the beach that you've surveyed for. So, and it's really valuable for researchers too, because you're contributing data into our understanding of the distribution of shark species around the UK.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring us back to the Indian Ocean now, David, because there's another question here. Well, I'm assuming your answer will be from that area. What's the most exciting wildlife encounter you've had during your research?
Oh, good question. So the whale shark was definitely up there. The whale shark was definitely up there. The first time I went to the Czech Archipelago was in 2014, and I remember diving down. And to put into context, before I worked in the Czech Archipelago, I'd done about 300 dives in Indonesia and the Philippines and never seen a shark. That's the context. And one of the first dives I had in 2014 was surrounded by dozens of reef sharks, and then this giant dog-toothed tuna came swimming by, and I was just like, wow, this place is incredible. I'd spent years trying to find sharks on my surveys elsewhere and never had any luck. So that was really a kind of a very cool moment for me, because it was my first opportunity to see what a healthy or a near healthy predator biomass should look like. And then you kind of go back and you think, well, what was I looking at before? Like, how shifted and how changed are these habitats and these reefs that I've surveyed before, if this is what I should be seeing? So that was one of the best moments. But I mean, also working out there, you get to encounter a number of other species. You get to see coconut crabs, which can be the size of like dustbin lids, or juvenile red-footed boobies who like to join you when you're out looking for sharks, and are somewhat comical. I liken them to Muppets. They would make good Muppet characters. So yeah, lots of great encounters with wildlife. And as I said at the beginning, I love my job, and it's fun because you feel immersed in the wildlife that's around you.
Fantastic. I imagine there's just too many memorable moments to be able to count.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go back to your research with the sharks and the satellite tagging that you mentioned, because my question for you, David, is this all sounds very, very clever in principle, but how do you actually get hold of the shark in the first place? What does that involve?
Yeah, so it depends on the species at hand. Most of the time we will handline. We'll have a single hook in the water, and we'll catch a shark, bring it alongside the boat, turn it upside down, which puts the shark in a state of torpor, essentially sends it to sleep. And from there, you can just about see the tape measure here. We take length measurements. We sex the shark. We ID the species, take some DNA and muscle tissue samples, and then we will decide, based on what animal we have and its size, what kind of tag we want to attach. So if it's a satellite tag, we'll put that on the dorsal fin, or just at the base of the dorsal fin at the back, just like this. And this is on a silvertip shark. And if it's an acoustic tag or one of the other technologies, then we can do some minor surgery and insert the tag into the abdominal cavity. So yeah, that, and then you release the shark, and they're very, very robust animals. We also work on other species like marlin.
Sorry, I just realised, that's not a shark.
that is definitely not a shark. So yes, we work on one of the really challenging things about working out there is all you can do is put hook and bait in the water. You have no control over what takes it. So it can make for some unusual encounters with animals you weren't necessarily expecting to handle. But I mean, I love marlin. Marlin are incredible animals.
And I mean, are you able to still collect any information or data about those animals that you accidentally encounter?
Absolutely. Any animals we accidentally encounter, we make the most of the situation. So again, we'll take measurements, we'll take DNA and muscle tissue. And even if we're not specifically working on those data, we will make them available to collaborators around the world. We are very conscious that we work in a very remote location and an undersampled location. So if we can contribute to those global initiatives on marlin or rainbow runner or whatever other species it may be, then we absolutely do so. But also, the tissue samples we take from those, we can compare them with our sharks to see how they're behaving within the same ecosystem themselves. So which is feeding at a slightly higher trophic level than the others. So yeah, we always make the most of every opportunity. And also the animals being caught, it's gone through a degree of stress, and therefore it's important that it's not for nothing. And the animals will recover and we release them, but we've collected those valuable data while we've had them alongside the boat.
Brilliant. And so all adding to our understanding of the many different species which are found in this area. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to see if we can get through a few more questions. There's a popular one, David. Is it true, this is from Mackenzie, who's age 9, is it true sharks don't get cancer-related diseases? Do you know anything about that?
That's a good question, Mackenzie, and I know it's a hot topic of debate, and I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not sure I'm in a position where I can give you the correct answer right now. I'll have a look and I'll answer it in the blog after this event for you.
So it's worth mentioning the top 5 questions that we don't get time for during today's event. We will answer them for you and pop them in a blog tomorrow. So so that will be one that we can try and answer.
I'll give you a
then.
full answer tomorrow, Mackenzie.
Another popular question, David, is have you seen many sharks and tuna hurt by discarded fishing gear, such as fishing nets? Is this something that you ever encounter?
Unfortunately, yes. So as I mentioned, where we work is a large marine protected area. So there is no legal fishing that goes on there. But both there and elsewhere, I have seen and unfortunately gone diving and encountered illegal gear that's either drifted accidentally onto those reefs and it will catch other sharks and animals. We've also encountered these drifting fish aggregation devices, which the tuna industry use to, they act like tuna magnets. All tuna are kind of drawn to them, but they also attract other species such as sharks and turtles. And on both cases, we've seen sharks and turtles entangled in the nets that make that fish aggregation device. So yes, unfortunately, I have witnessed it, and it's not a nice thing to see. But thankfully, I haven't seen too much of it.
I've got another question which might be stretching your knowledge, David, but is there such a thing as a vegetarian shark? Do all sharks eat meat?
Well, so you have your big filter feeding sharks, the whale shark and the basking sharks around the UK, but they're still feeding on really small fish and really small crustaceans. So while they're not feeding on other fish, they're still technically feeding on animals. But you also, sharks have there's a really wide breadth of diet among sharks, from feeding on large mammals through to plankton, but also feeding on invertebrates and bivalve mollusks in the sediment. So there's an amazing diversity out there, if that answers your question.
Brilliant. That was a really interesting question. That one was from Izzy. So thank you very much, Izzy. Okay, we've just got a couple of minutes left. So please do keep upvoting the questions which you would like David to answer, because as I mentioned, we will take the top 5 most popular ones and answer them in a blog tomorrow. But before we finish, David, you've given us a brilliant insight into your work in Chagos and in the Indian Ocean, and it does look so like such a beautiful area.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you've mentioned a lot of the threats there. Have you seen changes just in the time that you've been there? Because you mentioned the first time you went out to do research was in 2014.
Yeah, so in the 7 or so years I've been out there, it's definitely felt like we're seeing fewer and fewer sharks compared to those first observations. And it's really hard to quantify, though. And as I've mentioned, illegal fishing is a problem that we're trying to resolve out there. We've also had back-to-back bleaching events that have impacted the reefs, and therefore the habitat is degraded. So that could be driving it. As I also mentioned, we're out there so infrequently that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that, it's just in chance that during our surveys and our observations that we've just dived on a day when the sharks were elsewhere. So my gut feels like, yes, that there has been a change and there has been a reduction in the shark community out there, but it's very, very hard to quantify that and have any degree of certainty. But certainly I have not felt like I've been surrounded by dozens of sharks since that first expedition I was part of. So yeah, unfortunately, but we are working with the communities and working with the MPA managers to try and resolve this issue.
That's the marine protected areas.
The marine protected area, yeah, and also the communities that we know are engaging in illegal fishing. And the real challenge here is addressing the cause. Why they feel they need to act this way? Is it because of issues with their own fishery? So ZSL is involved in a number of projects that's trying to address that issue, and I'm hopeful in the future that we will see conservation benefits for those species. And we've been the data we've been collecting on tracking them, both with the satellites and the acoustic tags, has enabled us to really understand where the key areas are, and if we do need to enforce or we do need to kind of protect certain areas within the archipelago, we've got a good idea of where they are now, so we can be a bit more efficient with protecting the sharks that are there. So yeah, a multifaceted approach.
Well, that's brilliant that your research is helping us to identify those areas which are sort of most important. So those are the ones that we can focus on and conserve for the future. Thank you so much, David, for
Thank you, Charlotte,
sharing your work with us today and answering all of those brilliant questions as well from our viewers. As I mentioned,
thank you for all the questions.
I'll be putting those top 5 questions to David after the event, and we will answer them in a blog tomorrow. But thanks again, David. It's been brilliant hearing more about your work.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
I'm going to share my screen with you all now one last time, because we would really like to know what you thought of today's event. So please do take a moment to fill out our Survey Monkey. You can find it at surveymonkey.com/r/wild lunch. That's surveymonkey.com/r/wild lunch. And even if you've completed it before, you can complete it again. We would love to hear what you thought. We have extended our Wild Lunch Wednesdays series into April. We've got 2 brilliant speakers lined up for you, talking about some very small animals, some dwarf geckos in Colombia, and then our final event will be focusing on tigers in Nepal. So I do hope you're able to join us then. All of the information is on our website. To ensure you don't miss an event in the future, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course follow us on Twitter as well for all further details about upcoming events. But thank you all for joining us today and for your brilliant questions. We hope to see you again. Bye.